Good evening. This is a special meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. The time is 7 p.m. and the date is April 25, 2017. At this time, I will call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates, the alternates taking full part in the discussions and becoming a voting member in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for conflict of interest. Present tonight are members Ms. Betty Hollow, Ms. Kate Housley, and just right now, Ms. Joan Krajnanski, Ms. Lisa Carson, and alternates are Mr. Ed Baum and Mr. Aaron Thomas. I am John Golsey, the chair. Also present are zoning administrator Mr. Rick Sorois, Secretary Mr. Paul Eschenbacher, and Law Director Ms. Lisa Eliason. At this time, I invite you to view a pre-recorded video on the rules and procedures of the board, and the volume will be adjusted shortly.
The Athens Board of Zoning Appeals operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator or secretary will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give reason why the appeal should be viewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the appellant or their representative will offer for proof someone in the following words. Testimony on the floor shall be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. According to Athens City Code, Section 23.07.03b, the board has power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code, Section 23.07.10c, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact, based directly on the particular evidence presented to it, that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. Not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which variance is sought, one or the other or in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. Any person, resident, or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the Board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the Board to the applicant. Thank you.
In addition, the board also has the power to review decisions of the zoning administrator where an error is alleged. There are two cases on tonight's agenda. Case number 1 would be 17-8V, the property at 110 West Union Street. And the second case is an interpretation, case number 17-07I. The board is required to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak concerning any item on the agenda please stand? Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you will present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you. Be seated, please. Okay, case number 1 is case 17-08V. The property is 110 West Union Street. Zone is B1. And Mr. Nicholas Bittner, AIA at BDT, is the appellant. Appellant is requesting variances from ACC 23-1001, Table A, Schedule of Bulk Controls, to allow a building with a left side setback of 1 foot 2 inches, where 12 feet 6 inches is the minimum requirement. From ACC 23-1001, Table B, off-street parking requirements, to allow 4 on-site parking spaces, where 10 parking spaces are the minimum requirement. And from ACC 23-08-1A, to allow 2 on-site parking spaces, each to be 162 square feet in area, where 180 square feet in area is the minimum requirement. And Mr. Sorois, based on the plans that you brought in here, it seems that in addition to the 4 parking spaces that is on-site, they have identified 4 off-site?
That's correct, off to the left of the property.
Okay, and those are de-restricted?
Yes, they're
To the
of same
partners.
one.
And so basically, we are looking for 2 more, and then giving a variance for 2 of them to be a smaller size.
Compact parking,
Okay, very
that's
good.
correct.
Any questions for the code office? No? Okay. Would the appellant please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record?
Hi, I'm Nicholas Bittner with BDT. My home address is here in Athens as well. It's 24 Canterbury Drive. BDT is at 507 Richland Avenue. I want to thank the chairperson Goldsey and as well as the rest of the members of the BZA for hearing this case. We appreciate it. Those are the 3 items I believe we have left from our review. The first one to touch on is the Table A under Title 23-1001 on the Table A, Schedule Bulk Controls, the side yard setback. I believe there might be 2 floor plans floating around here, or 2 site plans, or is it just the one?
I just provided them, the ones you provided
Okay.
to me, so they have a setup there with the 1/6.
Okay. It's gotten a little better, but it's still obviously not 12/6. There was an earlier plan that was showing the 1 foot 2 that
It's
Rick
the
has
same.
cited, so that's why I just wanted to be clear why there's a 2, variations, what you're seeing on the plan and what's on that, I think the agenda. So we're looking for 1 foot 6. We are looking at this as, basically the practical difficulty or undue hardship because most of the buildings along that Depot Street and Union at the corner there and along Union South and North all are further on the setback. Pretty much most of the buildings sit right at the building lot line. Right now, in fact, Cats Den has a part of its, I think it's cooler, and its concrete wall actually sits on the city right away. So part of this project would be to fix those issues, move the cooler to a different location, and get that retaining wall off of the city right away. And I'll just kind of go through each one of them and why we're asking for the request, and we can kind of come back through if that makes sense. The parking item as well is that we are looking what we believe is a minimum variance for the 2 spots that we are not able to fit within our site, as well as the adjacent property on the what would be considered the leftist of the site if you're looking at the plan on the north. Again, that site with the 4 parking is deed restricted to 110 West Union. So right now we have 12 spots in total at the back of the 110 West Union lot, as well as the, I believe it's considered 0 Depot Street, that deed restricted property. Based on the square footage of the restaurant renovation, as well as having the 4 bedrooms on the 2nd floor, we require 1 parking spot per bedroom, which we don't have any objections to that. It's really just trying to get the 2 additional ones that would be deemed for that 1st floor commercial business space, which requires 1 spot per 200 square feet. The last item there is what we're talking about with the some of the parking spaces being smaller than what's currently in the code right now. We are requesting a variance for having a couple of the spaces be for compact car use. So again, only 2 out of the total 12 that we're asking for that variance, which that seemed like a pretty good rule of thumb when we were doing our research on cities that have been putting in compact car controls into their code, is that 25% was the max that they were permitting. And other than that, we did do a little bit of a study, and there does seem to be a good amount of public improved parking right around that 110 West Union site, unlike, State Street or, Columbus Road. There is a lot of parking, public parking, metered parking that is right adjacent to this property. We have an expectation that currently most people that use that space don't drive to it, that would continue to be the case in the future, even after it is renovated. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, and we can kind of go back over each one of the points of the variances that we're requesting.
Did I hear you saying, or did I see on the map, that this left set side bike is now 1 foot 6 inches
Yeah, we
instead
have.
of 1, 2?
Yeah, 1,
Okay.
2. So we were able to scoot the building about 4 more inches over to try to, and still get the square footage that the owners were looking for to be able to make the renovation feasible.
Any questions?
2 questions. So is the setback that we're discussing tonight, how different is it from the setback that exists now?
Well, now we're infringing on the setback, where we're basically over the lot line by about a foot at the cooler. So in fact, this would be an improvement of 2'6" from the current existing condition.
And the second question is, will you designate the parking places? Will the rentals be located where?
We will, because in fact, some of the spaces we can't use because they're deed restricted to another property on
Correct.
Washington Avenue. So we're basically labeling those spaces as, for 67 Washington's use only. And I believe we were doing the same with the bedrooms, is making it clear that this is for, the apartment dwellers versus guests of the tavern or restaurant, whatever you'd like to call it.
So you're saying those will be in the rear of the building, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other parking places will be located where? The other 4 additional spaces?
They are, the address is called 0 Depot Street. It sits behind, at the corner there on Depot. You might have to step over here. Okay, so you can understand the logic behind the site plan. On the left side is basically,
All right, so,
my left here.
right.
This would be the Union Street access if you're entering the building from Union.
I see.
Since you're asking the question.
Right, so it's behind, it's
Yeah,
behind,
exactly.
okay, I was
Behind
in that
there.
spot
So you
today.
basically come up Depot Street and take a left, and it's behind that. This is not actually owned by this property, so I believe that property has parking.
Correct.
Here, Little Drive. So, as you can also see, we were calling this Grinders at the time. Obviously, that building's changed hands. It looks like it may do so again before we get this project through. But that building does sit much closer to, it's going to be, that building across from us is right on the lot line. So we are trying to be a little bit better than our neighbors, but at least kind of follow suit.
Will all of the restaurant and brewing activity and customer use take place inside the building?
That is correct.
Okay.
Do you have to have
Thank you.
parking for employees?
Oh, thank you. For the,
I assume that's covered.
yeah, it's kind of covered in that 200 square foot, one parking space requirement.
And my other question is, where is this available public parking that you're referring to?
It's along Union Street.
Where?
Both the north and the south side of Union Street is metered.
Must be
It's
very
the city
recently.
metered parking spaces.
Recently.
There are 25 parking spaces with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
250-foot radius.
Well, I saw the radius
Yes.
picture.
You get the
I've got
radius
that.
25.
Yeah, we
I've
already
got
have that.
One
Yeah.
handicap space, there's a couple of service vehicle spaces,
Okay.
and another 18 or so general spaces.
Yes, I saw all that. I just am not familiar with those parking meters.
Yeah, and so we understand that they are shared public asset. We're not claiming
sure.
two spots for this development.
Any other questions for the appellant?
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
of the group? Has everyone seen the property, or at least familiar with that section? Okay, because
Yeah.
I did bring some pictures of what.
We have an aerial picture here.
Okay. Yeah, it will be a vast improvement, I will say. No offense to anyone who ever has been a patron there, but go ahead.
So looking at this drawing, the deck is for the apartments?
Correct. The deck is for accessing the apartments there. What we wanted to do a deck so that it had a lighter foundation. The retaining there wall is mostly there holding back the hillside and the parking lot, so we just didn't want to interfere with that in the development. But
So
yeah.
that deck is on the second story?
Yeah, yeah. So the idea is that the second story is mostly what we'd like to see happen, and how we're going to do the parking is that's mostly a residential parking in the back. So it's going to serve that 67 Washington Street, which is a rental unit, and it's going to serve the apartments on the second floor. So the Catsden parking would be, for that first floor use would be mostly in that Zero Depot Street location. So that way, people that are parking back there are mostly entering the residence from the second floor. So the residence is only access from that side, whereas the commercial buildings that own access from the ground floor in Union.
And we would also be, and obviously.
We're going to have a chance for you to come to the podium.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Any other questions? Just an unrelated question. What AIA stands for?
American Institute of Architects.
Okay, thank you. You may be seated for now, and then we may call you back again.
Oh, of course, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
At this point, anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Please state your name and your address.
Good evening. So my name is John Katowski, and I live at 14 Northwood Drive here in Athens, Ohio. And actually I'm related to the project because I've been helping them manage it and try to move it forward. So I've been involved interacting with the code office, but even before that with the planning commission and others. Just a couple of things I'd like to add would be that in addition, so there is encroachment into the right-of-way of Depot Street. There are three items that are actually encroaching in that right-of-way. One is there's a retaining wall that is extended out there that will be taken back. There is the cooler that they talked about, which will be relocated behind the new structure that is built. And then the third item is there's a two-story, single-bedroom residential property on the corner. It's a wood structure, and it will be raised. But all three of those items encroach into the city right-of-way. So basically, we'll eliminate that. We'll eliminate the house and build this addition. Put some of the square footage of the two-story resident on top of the new addition, tie it into the second floor of the cat's den. Part of the rear of the cat's den on the second floor will be removed and regraded. And so what will end up happening is going from three one-bedroom apartments to one four-bedroom apartment, and then a renovated lower level. I think that also another value here is that these new apartment will be in very good shape. The whole thing is going to be sprinkled. It's going to be quite a nice facility and begin to be part of the revitalization of that whole Union Street corridor that the university is involved in doing things with as well. But again, that's all I have to say, and not really totally speaking to the variances that are being requested, but to just a little bit more of the logistics of the project.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
I have a question for somebody.
Who?
I'm not sure.
Okay, let me know when
Code
you're ready.
enforcement, I think.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this request? Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard now. Please state your name and your address for the records, please.
Chris Wolf, 8560 Elliotsville Road. I have some properties on the west side, and I own the Smiling Skull Saloon building next to this project. I am speaking in general comment. I'm in favor of anything that's going to help any business down there, including my own, okay? But some of this stuff is sort of a little confusing to me, so I have a couple of questions that I'm sure we can clarify. The dumpster, that's on city property, is that correct? Have you guys addressed that, where the dumpster is or going, or?
We'll have to find out.
Well, actually, it needs clarified because number 9, which says the dumpster enclosure, is not listed unless I'm totally missing it on this schematic here. I don't see number 9 anywhere.
I can respond to that.
Okay.
I recently asked if I could put a dumpster on the street there, but I was turned down, so I'm just sort of, I thought that was the city right away. Okay. I just wanted that clarified. And because the dumpster's pretty big, and I would think that might take up a whole parking space if it goes behind the bar or across the street there.
This is upstairs.
Should be. Right.
The answer to my question about the beer cooler, I sort of thought that was on the right of way too. Those retaining walls, when you guys are talking about the retaining wall, is that the retaining wall as you're facing your parking lot to the right? Is that the retaining wall up to the top left? Is that on the city right of way? Or is the little wall where the steps are to the apartment? There's like two walls, left and right.
It's the latter.
The one down by the steps. The one up on the other side is not on the city right of way. Okay. What I'm sort of getting at here is, there's been some talk occasionally about cutting Depot into West Washington and over to State. And I thought maybe someday they might want to put a sidewalk there. Okay. So I like to look ahead and not go backwards. On these reduced size parking spaces, the ones the city are talking about doing are parallel parking spaces. I don't know the exact measurements, 9 by 12 or 14 or something like that. I measured my, not full-size pickup, small pickup, and my wife's Volvo, so what kind of size are these miniature spaces gonna be? 8.5 feet or something like that?
We have a total of 162 square feet, and he will
That doesn't
explain
tell
what
me
the
the width
exact
or the
size
length,
dimension
right?
is going to be.
I just got my tape measure up before I came just to check this out. And my wife's Volvo is, let's see where I have this. It's about 5.5 feet wide, not counting the two rear view mirrors, which adds about another 1.5 feet, which makes it 7 feet. And then if you open the door 1.5 feet, you can't really get out of the car. You need about 2 feet to open the door, which is not the full swing open, just part way. So it seems that anything less than 9, you can't get the, you know, if you're in a parallel space downtown, you can open your doors. If you're next to each other like this, with your mirrors, I don't see how you can get into an 8
Well, they are
foot.
typically 9 by 20, which is 180 square
I thought
feet,
they were
but
at-
sometimes these might be 8 feet. And they will explain the
Okay.
exact size.
I'm just saying that, sure, we're gonna provide 20 spaces, but you're not gonna be able to get cars into them, is what don't like people to allude to. You know, some of this parking stuff, you know, that guy that wanted to stack 4 cars, yeah, you got the parking, but who wants to park there, you know? So I just, you know, I'm just curious about that. The parking, the dumpster, the city right away. That was all. You guys are in charge of the city right aways.
Actually, I was kind of more concerned about maybe the noise coming from your place. Is that when you have music or band playing in there?
Never heard any noise there.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay. All right. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard now. Sir, you can come back and address those questions, concerns. And you too, if you like.
I did only mention 2 things in the right-of-way currently. I'm not quite sure how I can fit it a 2-story house, so please forgive me for that one. That one does sit about, 6 inches to a foot over the right-of-way as well. You know, a little corner that north. I guess it's the southwest corner there sticks out. The dumpster enclosure, I saw there was a little bit of finding. That would sit right along that line. I'll kind of point out.
Yes.
So here, I'm sorry, off of Depot Street, that's
Steps are.
for the dumpster enclosure. So yeah, this is, the dumpster enclosure would go right along that line here, basically a fence, and you open it up and they get inside there. So this is that retaining wall, where the
Okay.
steps that we're gonna be taking out. It's a sort of secondary one.
So can you tell me how large this space is? And the reason I'm asking this is because, we've had other cases where people squeezed in parking and all of a sudden dumpster space was not available and stuck out or...
Yeah, this is, we can kind of pass this around if you guys like. This is the steps and that retaining wall. That's the one that we're going to be taking out and regrading the drive so it's not as steep there. The steps, and this is that cooler. So basically retaining wall, cooler, house, all sit in the city right away right now, a foot or so, I guess.
Right.
So
That's the current location of the dumpster.
yeah, that's the
Sitting on the street,
Yeah, it's
right?
even
So-
more so. in the right away,
So
you
is
know.
the dumpster then going back in this area?
No, so that would be here in the plan. It's actually gonna go more forward, basically where the cooler is and further back, and we're gonna knock out that wall.
It's number 3.
So it's gonna be out the way.
Yeah,
more than
so
what
it'll
it
be
is.
all pushed back. So right now, that dumpster, if you're looking at that picture, it's like, right.
Oh, I know where it is, right? So what you're saying is it'll be well off the street and there will be sufficient room to get the trash hauler in there to pick the dumpster up.
Absolutely, yeah, pretty good. This right now is really just that pole just for their service, so that would get relocated. It won't be
For
necessary at
whose
that
service?
spot. Just for that 110, it basically comes off of Depot Street, hits that pole, and then it goes into the house.
Okay.
So it's, usually those are considered like a private line. It's hard to get AP to take those down. As far as the, and I'll come back and show you that image just so you have a better shot of it since you asked the question. I believe the other one was compact car sizes. So you're correct, 9 by 20 is our conventional parking spot size. And the two compact car ones, we are still going to be the 180 square foot, but we're doing 10 by 18 as the size.
Okay.
So it's basically, they're not as deep, but we give them a little bit more room on either side. So that we thought, again, with it not being an outright codified item, we want to at least hit the 180 square feet.
So if I understand, this last variance goes away then, right? 162 square feet, is that what you're saying?
Well, no, because there's also, it's 180 plus, I believe, I don't have the code right in front of me, it's either 9 or 20 has to be one of the numbers, so it's kind of,
Okay.
we didn't hit, I
Oh,
think it's
okay,
the 9 foot.
on the
so-
other ones, you are changing the
Yeah,
size. Okay,
yeah.
that's fine, yeah.
So it's a soft variance. I don't think that goes in the official record.
Do you have the dimensions for the one that are 162 square feet?
I'm not quite sure where that came from.
Well, these are smaller.
Mr.
And I
Goldstein?
couldn't see them in there.
Okay.
But
On their letter.
I don't think there are any that are 162. The ones that are, we call compact are 10 feet by 18. So they're shorter than the conventional dimension that we use, and that's why we're calling them a compact. But they actually are 180 square feet. So the two are 10 by 18. The other parking spaces are all 9 by 20.
Well, if that's the case, they don't need the variance for the last one then.
Yes,
I think
because
they
it's,
do.
one half size has to be 20.
No.
No.
No, it's still
No.
180.
The two required dimensions are 180 square feet
Feet.
and 9 feet in
9
width.
feet, that's what width.
Okay.
Oh, so,
Okay.
So we cross out the last,
So that, I guess
Right.
that's true then.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. So, was there any other clarification or question? I think it was the dumpster, what items were in the right of way, and then the parking.
Just one last thing. You have the parking spaces that go with the apartment up on West Washington. You have the 4-bedroom parking spaces. And then you're supposed to provide 10, but you're going to provide 4.
like to come up to the
I'm looking at 12 spaces, and that's what it is.
Sir, please come to the podium. We
Yeah,
need to
I'll-
get you on the camera.
I sort of lost track on those parking spaces with the West Washington apartment, the 4-bedroom apartment, and the parking that's needed. So I just,
If
that
you could-
adds up to 12 spaces right there, right?
If you could come forward, please, and you also come forward in here, show him
Oh, yeah.
where those other 4 parking spaces that are leased to another property are.
Because I did that left
It
and
was
right
on
once.
the picture you just showed us, the iPad had the
So we
picture.
got the 8 spots that are back here in the rear of the
And that's a better
110,
picture
and then the
when you
4
showed us.
spots over here.
Yeah,
So
that
4 of the
Yeah.
spots would be restricted
No,
to
but I
6.
Because they ain't mentioned they're gonna relocate the pole, which is gonna
Yeah,
give more
it
access.
was in fact set at one time.
Right.
So in the latest transaction, when
It's hard to put that in
67
draw.
Washington Street
Why would we
was
gonna move
sold
this
by
pole?
But that's why you
Western
put
Union,
all these notes in.
that's
Yeah.
when they
You know,
just
that pole
derestricted.
actually.
The pole's not mentioned at all.
So then there's 4 here, we are
But
labeling
mention
8,
the
7,
steps
6,
that
and
are
5
taken
as for
out.
Yeah.
67
Mention the
Washington,
poles.
4, 3,
Right.
2, and 1
These little things sometimes are kind of important.
And then that way this would become, you know, because assuming that people are entering the front of the building.
That was the situation.
Whereas, the, you know, and what here is.
Show me real quick where the dumpsters
Oh, absolutely. So this plan's kind of split, so that's the rear of the property, this is the front of the property. So as you come up Depot Street, it's gonna be
500
right
that'd be
here.
good.
Where that is where pretty much is the further.
So it can be a 50 by 10 space.
We just put up a little screening fence in it.
What if you divided 50 by 10,
So
it'd
you'll
go
keep it shut.
20
Sure.
Oh, sorry, does that look, how are you?
No, you can have.
Okay, folks,
450
any final questions for the appellant?
dimensions. So,
All right, you may be seated. You remember what the question was that you had?
Yes, I
Okay.
found the answer
Okay.
for myself.
Okay, very good, very good. We close the discussion from the floor. And unless there is any discussion, we can maybe ask someone to make a motion. And by the way, before you make the motion, you may want to change that left side setback to 1 foot 6 inches. And then disregard the last variance.
Okay, I'll move that the board approve case number 1708V, presented by Nicholas Bittner for property located at 110 West Union Street for a variance from ACC 23-1001, Table A, Scheduled Bulk Controls to allow a building with a left side setback of 1 foot 6 inches, where 12 feet 6 inches is the minimum requirement, from ACC 23-1001, Table B, off-street parking requirements to allow 4 on-site parking spaces, 4 off-site but deed-restricted parking spaces, a total of 8 parking spaces, where 9 parking spaces are the minimum requirement.
I thought it was
We're
10.
10.
Yeah.
Oh, 10, sorry.
Maybe you should say where those off-site parking places will be. What's the address?
It's a 0 Depot, sorry, Sharon.
Can you put that in the variance?
Yes, so to allow 4 parking places on-site and 4 off-site deed restricted at 0 Depot Street,
Thank you.
where 10 parking spaces are the minimum requirement.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone.
Don't look at me.
Yeah, there is, I think the setbacks in there, they're all, can't be met.
Isn't that true? A lot of properties in this
That's what
area?
it is in the same vicinity, yeah. Any? Aaron, you're pretty good on those things.
I mean, it's comparable to what's down there already.
Yeah.
It's kind of already, it's almost improving the location.
Yeah, and the shape of the property.
Especially
maybe.
with the pole relocation. That was the picture on the iPad was a big help, especially for the parking situation, because that wasn't mentioned in the plans that the utility pole would be relocated.
Mhm. Anyone else?
Mr. Colsey?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry, what did you say at first, the setbacks are what?
I thought the setbacks for all those properties in that zone, in that neighborhood they do not meet,
Okay.
yeah. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of the public purposes. Now we come to this side.
What did you say the exceptional circumstances are?
The size and shape of the property.
Yeah,
right?
size and shape
Yeah.
and,
Okay.
Yeah, I think you just couldn't do an improvement and meet code given the restricted
Okay,
size
I
and
can accept
shape.
that. It is an hardship.
preservation of equal property rights. I'm not gonna read it, but
I don't think it's an issue.
issue,
No.
okay. Minimum variance. I think we minimized it quite a bit.
Yep.
Absence of detriment. Authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest.
True.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would just have one question about that. Having been down to places on Union Street and not being able to find a parking place, have to do some illegal parking over at Station Street. So we have to realize that we are giving a variance for parking in a situation that is overcrowded. Even though it's public, there's a lot of public parking, and they did that interesting diagram, but the circle of 200 feet and whatever, 250 feet. I'm just bringing that up because that is a situation down in West Union. There's many places down there that do not have off-street parking. And
You know, my
it can be
experience,
difficult.
every time I go in that area, it's always parking
always
available. It seems to be that I have never any problem.
I guess you don't go on a weekend, John.
Well, you know,
But most of them vary on the business locations too, compared to the hours of operations. If you, especially if you got students down in the central classroom building during the daytime, or someone going over to, you know, the restaurants over on Depot Street. So
Yeah, well, it's
pretty
more
varied.
along the line of the, so that would be the east side of Union that has a lot of businesses. I'm just bringing that up. I think it needs to be mentioned that we are giving a variance for this parking.
right, right. Not of a general nature.
Right,
Lisa?
it's not.
No?
No.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? And by the way, these two gentlemen, they don't vote, so that doesn't mean that you're against. All those in favor of the variance? Yeah.
Can I make one more comment, or is that, it's all closed?
I think we're close.
Yeah. All in favor of this variance, please raise your hand. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have the variance. 5-0. Alrighty, case number 17-7I for interpretation. This was tabled in the last meeting. The properties that are on the agenda tonight are 218 and 224 West Union Street, Zone B3. Appellant is Mr. Don Linder. Do we need a motion to get him off the table or untable it?
Yes.
Would you like to make the
I
motion?
can't.
Oh, you can't? Okay.
I move that we untable case 17071. Aye.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor? Okay, untabled. I like to say that word, untabled. Appellant is requesting an interpretation from the board on the refusal of permit application number PR 17-000001 from ACC 230602A as stated on the original agenda. And this case was continued from 4/11/17. And once we have the appellants at the podium, we need to make a couple of clarifications, and then we will go from there. Is there anything the code office would like to add at this point? No? Okay. Mr. Pearson, are you representing, or would you like to come to the podium? State your name and your address.
My name's Steve Pearson. I reside at 7520 Lee Master Road, Athens, Ohio, and I'm here tonight representing Mr. Don Linder, who is a co-owner of both properties, 218 and 224 West Union Street.
Okay. I want to clarify two items in here for the records. When you applied for the appeal that both properties, 218 and 224 at West Union Street were mentioned. But in the last meeting, you said that you would only going to be appealing the 218 West Union. Is that still the case?
The reason that was mentioned at the last meeting was because that was the only property where we actually had a written refusal to know what the basis of the refusal was. And we didn't have anything from the code office on 218. Now, I believe, though,
We're talking about 218.
you've already, 224, excuse me. We have it for 218, but not 224. And in the meantime, 224 has been refused, is my understanding, for the same, I guess, for that same
For the
section of
same-
the code.
So your appeal now is for both cases tonight?
We're ready to present both
Both cases?
properties, yes.
Okay, we wanted to clarify that. And the second one was the basis of the refusal from the Safety Service Director originally was mentioned, and that was a typo, I believe, was ACC 230602. But are you aware and fully understand that the basis for refusal is ACC 230502?
That's not right.
Yes, we're aware of that.
Okay, so let the records show that the refusal was based on ACC 230502 and not the ACC 230602. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Now, please state your case.
One thing that I'd like to make clear right from the start is that the circumstances for both of these properties are different. There are different circumstances, and so I would like to present the case for 218 first,
Okay.
and then 224 second. Secondly, our request for an interpretation, I guess, has been answered, although we would still appreciate the interpretation of the board that the refusal may be based on misinformation gleaned from the zoning map and then the applicable section that was applied based on the map. So I guess, are we authorized then essentially to ask for an interpretation, and then if it's determined that a nonconforming use is the situation, we're asking for substitution, that we can also present a request for substitution of nonconforming use?
Well, my understanding is, and maybe we can verify with the law director, that if we disagree with the service director, safety service director decision, then you already have the permit, you have the approval.
Yep, so I'll initially here present for an interpretation,
Okay,
and if you,
authorize a
right,
substitution.
if you agree with the interpretation of the service safety director, then we would like to present substitution nonconforming use. And just as you mentioned, if you agree with our presentation and our interpretation of the map and the text, then there'll be no need to go further with that.
Okay.
Well,
Uh,
can we go forward with the substitution?
That's what I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
I
That should be
don't
another
think-
case then, right?
I think it's,
It should be advertised, and
yes,
we are only doing the interpretation now.
right.
Once you do the interpretation.
Okay, and then we'll have the opportunity then to present for substitution of nonconforming use
Yes,
at an additional meeting.
in the additional meeting, right?
Right. I mean, to be real honest with you, we're kind of shooting at a moving target here. We were just now informed
Right.
that it was a substitution of nonconforming use. We're ready to present on both. If we just want to present on interpretation tonight, that's fine, as long as we have the right reserved to come back to the board and ask for substitution of nonconforming use.
Although, on the same 230502A substitution, it says when authorized by the BZA, and I assume that has to be a different meeting, right? Or we can just authorize tonight?
You should be able to authorize tonight.
Okay. So, let's go through the first part first.
Tell me
Okay.
the number of the thing again, 23020.
502, and then A. And 6 was confused. Anything else you would like to add now? Mr. Linder, you may as well also come to the podium and state your name, and then you can both speak if you like.
need to speak at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. At the last meeting, we provided you, and hopefully you still have the photographs we provided, an aerial photograph
Right.
that depicts both the properties, 224 and 218. And you can see they're different dimensions.
Right.
One reason why the cases are different. Another exhibit that you were provided was a zoning map that indicated where the zone boundaries were. And the drawing that I just provided was essentially to give a little more clarification on where the property line and the zoning line are at the rear yard of 228 West Union Street.
218.
218, excuse me. As you can see, the boundary line between the R3 district to the north and the B3 district to the south cuts across the rear yard of the property. The refusal was based on essentially the review that indicated that the development of a parking area was occurring in a B3 zone, when actually it is not occurring in a B3 zone, it's occurring in an R3 zone.
Right.
In the R3 zones, parking areas are permitted by right. It's just a use that's permitted in the zone that can be approved administratively. And for parking areas that are 1, 2, or 3 in number, and in this case the proposal is for 2 parking spaces, there's no paving requirement, there's no landscape requirement, no buffering requirements. The definition of a parking area is just an area where you park cars or vehicles or bicycles is also included in the definition. So those standards for development of parking areas that specifically say in the code are required at 4 or more do not apply in this case. So our very simple contention would be that 2 gravel parking spaces or a gravel parking area in an R3 zone is a right that's principally permitted, that's permitted by right, and therefore the permit should have been approved. And the argument is just as simple as that.
You mentioned something about they don't have to be paved, but I think it mentions either concrete, asphalt, gravel, other things, but not grass. So I don't think you can just park on the grass, right?
No, the areas, but if you have, in the packet of information that you were previously provided, there should be a photograph of the area in question. I don't know if you guys got a copy
I
of
don't
this
think
or
we have a
not.
copy of that.
I've got it on there if you want to just pass it down the line. In practical terms, one of the reasons that paving is not being considered at this time is because that's the lowest spot in that area and there's no storm drainage available to connect to the city storm sewer. So the idea is to leave it as permeable surface so water can still percolate just as best it can down through without being on a paved surface where stormwater runoff then would have to be controlled. So not only is it not required, it's also in practical terms really not necessary.
Okay, I'm confused again. I understood from this application that there were already 3 parking spaces, and the proposal was to be allowed to add 2 additional parking places. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there are
So
two,
you would then have 5 parking spaces, and the code says if it goes over 4, you need to do some kind of a paving job.
right, our contention would be, though, that these are two separate parking areas in two different zones. One area where it's not permitted to be stacked, another area where it's
So
permitted.
where are the 3 existing ones, and which
Correct.
zone are they?
Right,
Which zone are they in?
they're in B3, 3 stacked parking spots.
Okay, 3 are in B3.
There's a
Correct.
garage and then the 3 is like.
Okay. And
I thought if it was more than 4, then it cannot be gravel, but it's less than 4,
That's
it
right,
can be
okay.
gravel.
Well, can I ask a question then?
Sure.
Because this does get a little confusing about the parking places. So I talked to Mr. Suris tonight about the grandfather parking at 218, correct? That's why it has 3 parking places, because they're grandfathered. So that's part of the grandfather that is, that comes with that B3 district for that house, not to have a business on the first floor, correct? Right.
But that
Okay.
doesn't have anything really to do with the parking. The nonconformity is the lack of the business on the first floor.
But then it gets very confusing, because then they're in a B3 and they have stacked parking.
Which is also non-conforming.
Right, exactly.
So there's two non-conforming
Two non-conforming
parts to
issues
this
there.
property.
But the property is in the ownership of one owner. You don't have an owner for the B3 or R3 and an owner for the B2, do you?
No,
No, you
No.
don't. So,
right. Well, then I have another question. And this has to do with, now we're over into the R3, right? The orange slot. And under R3, when it says about parking area, you go over to section 230801B, and it says that off-street parking area, and doesn't mention front or rear, or parking structures for residential structures shall not be located between the required setback line and the right-of-way. So are either of these parking lots located in the setback line or the right-of-way of these 2 properties?
Because the alley separates it, correct?
The alley separates.
The alley separates what?
The R3 and the B3
The alley,
parking.
if you look,
Yeah, but that's,
yeah,
then you have a city right-of-way,
Okay.
right? Because you have the alleyway. This is why I'm asking this question.
right. The parking lot on 218, okay, we did some measurements, and the parking area is 23.4 feet, okay?
20,
23.4 feet into the R3.
so I thought it went almost all the
whereas-
way up to that fence, which is fencing off the yard of the adjacent property.
So you're about, and it's 25 feet, so you're, what? Yeah, 2 feet something, which is extending into the R3. So based on our property line, the property line goes down across, if you look at the plot map, the alleyway, this property line or the zoning line basically follows this across. Like they have pictured here. Okay.
okay, we see that. And so basically, this
Are we
whole
following?
thing becomes a parking
Yes,
space.
no,
isn't
I
it?
get that, but
Okay.
so then
where's the green
where
space?
that line runs, that cuts between the R3 and the
But this is
B3,
R3.
across 218's property, rear property, which is where they put the parking. My question is, do they put the parking in it says, shall not be located between the required setback line and right-of-way, so is a parking...
You can have a full lot coverage here, 100% full lot coverage.
But not, except, yes,
And then,
in a B3, can you do that
It's
in
a
an R3?
No. I
No.
don't think so.
No.
So how are you going to just cover the whole R3 section
Right.
with gravel?
Right, this is like, you
There's
can
no
have one
green
thing or
space
the
at
other,
all.
but you ain't getting them both.
understood.
Well, the way they are arguing, and this is the R3, they brought it up, and you can get the benefit of whether it's B3 or R3. You can argue both ways. If it's R3, then you have to have greener space. But if you extend it as B3, which this was basically was brought to our attention as B3, then you can gravel the whole thing.
Except it's in R3.
Except it's in an R3, so I think this, I mean, 218 already has 3 parking spaces, so it's not like we're causing irreparable harm to this property. This property is permitted to have 3 residents, and it has 3 grandfathered stacked
Grandfathered
parking.
in.
Right?
It's grandfathered in.
Right. So for 218, it just seems like we're wasting our time.
It's already there. It's
They already
space-
have
the
everything
space
you
is already
need
there.
for that piece of property.
It's non-conforming.
Right, and it's all there that they need.
And if they enlarge it, then they lose the nonconformity
Right.
or the grandfathering of that nonconformity. So by enlarging the parking, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it? If you want to change a nonconforming property and enlarge it, you lose the grandfather status, and then you got to put business on the first floor.
And you
Well,
can't have
that's what
stacked
we're asked
parking.
Theoretically.
to evaluate.
Yes,
That's what you're asked to
Yeah,
evaluate.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah, do you have to fix everything that's out of conformity, or just the one thing you're
No,
improving?
you
No,
cannot
everything.
make
They
it more
lose all their
nonconforming.
grandfather, and they are situated, the house is situated in this B3 property now. And it has to conform to that. And what's difficult is that it has a permit for 3 residents, and it has three parking places, a driveway, a garage, and a long driveway. So you can probably get 4 cars in there.
So the issue really is, do you want to take a non-conforming property and make it more non-conforming? Is
Less
that-
non-conforming.
No, more non-conforming by enlarging the use
Yeah,
of the property.
if I could call for a point of order, we determined at the beginning of this discussion that we were going to request an interpretation, and that the discussion about any change to a nonconforming use would be held in abeyance, possibly to a different discussion. The last 10 minutes of conversation has been about nonconforming use.
Yes, because that's what the case is all about.
No, that's not what our presentation is about. We're asking for an interpretation if the change in a nonconforming use was the correct citation,
Right.
or our contention that in an R3 zone, parking areas are permitted, and so we're not asking for any change, as everybody mentioned in the front. 3
But
occupants, 3
it's
stacked
the-
parking spots.
It's the use of the property, and the property includes the building and the parking. So by adding parking, you increase the use of that property. That's what the interpretation is all about. Is that correct or not correct?
Well, that's for you to determine.
Well, we can't discuss one without the other.
Well, I believe that we can. That's how we started out this conversation.
Yep.
Okay, let's continue.
So, I mean, you could agree with that it's a substitution of nonconforming use, and then we'll present later a case for substitution of nonconforming use. The first part here, which I believe we agreed to, was just, did the zoning official interpret the code correctly? Now, you also have in document possession, hopefully, is the summation of the code enforcement office recommending approval.
I
We had that
understand that.
discussion
We got that.
also.
We understand that.
And
But we do realize that is one step in the process. They can approve it and then move it on to, for a final approval. I mean, that's how it works in, when you have a hierarchy of approvals in any kind of
Exactly, that was a
business
staff
corporation.
recommendation, and we're just pointing out that we agree with the conclusion of the staff recommendation. Now, our arguments are a little bit different, but we came to the same conclusion.
Okay, Mr. Pearson, anything else you want to add before I call Mr.
No.
Linder? Mr. Linder, would you like to say anything? Add? No? Okay. Anyone would like to speak in opposition, in general, in favor? We only have one person. You're not testifying, so. Okay. You
Well,
may be
again, I'd just
seated.
like to reiterate that parking areas are permitted use in an R3 zone. Any parking areas less than 4 in number, 1, 2, or 3, can remain gravel. And there's a practical reason for that in this case, too. There's no drainage.
Yeah.
And we're not addressing anything at all on the non-conforming part of the lot. So it's kind of a, here you've got one lot. I mean, admittedly, it's one lot with a dissecting zone line. So do the lesser restrictive regulations of the R3 carry over to the B3? Code's not clear on that. Do the more restrictive regulations in the B3 go back across the zone line into the rear of the property where a parking area would not be permitted? The code's not very clear on that either.
It's not that parking itself would not be allowed, it's that additional parking makes the property more non-conforming. So you have to ask, should we make every property that wants to become more non-conforming, should we allow that? Is that to the advantage of the city? Is that to the advantage of, to whom is that an advantage? Is it something the city should encourage?
Well, I believe the city should encourage additional parking. I mean, you had a request tonight for a parking variance, which was granted. We're actually requesting to create parking in addition to parking that's grandfathered. We're trying to create more parking.
Yeah, but you don't need more parking, so.
Why are you adding parking?
Yeah.
You do have guests that come visit in this town. That's my right to have that parking.
Right.
But you need to speak at the podium if you're going to speak.
If I could, just real quickly, what you're talking about are the minimum requirements. I could propose to have a use of a property where the minimum required, say, was 5. I want to provide 10. In this case, the minimum required would be 1 for each occupant, which we have, but we're wanting to create additional parking in addition to
That would be
that.
fine if your property were not already non-conforming.
Well,
That's
okay,
the
we'll take the non-conforming argument, in the next bite at the apple, essentially, where we'll argue that the substitution of a non-conforming use for a not more objectionable non-conforming use is appropriate in this case. We're ready to make that argument also, but not, as agreed at the beginning of the meeting, not
Okay.
tonight. I'm
Sounds
ready to
good.
do it right now if you want to do it.
No, we'll address that when it comes.
Okay.
You may be seated for now, thank you.
Say anything, Don?
I'm not going to completely close the floor from discussion because we may want to call you back. I think at this point, it may be beneficial, each one of us go and state your findings or your ideas, maybe 3-4 minutes.
I'd like to hear from the law director, having asked her to come here.
Okay,
Thank you.
Because this is a law interpretation. It's not a decision as to should we do it, should we not do it, but we're trying to get an idea of what the law, what does the term least restrictive really mean? I'd say a B3 is more restrictive than an R3, but the code assumes that it's less restrictive because that's the way it's set up. And so we have some problems.
There's one area where a B3 is could be considered less restrictive, and that a B3 allows 100% lot coverage.
No,
Whereas
I mean, there
R3
are areas,
limit.
but when you look at you start with R1, R2, each one of them says, we'll do what the above does, but we'll do some more things. And so it seems to me that an R1 is the most restrictive we have. And as you go all the way down to B3, theoretically, in that table, the B3 is the least restrictive.
Right.
I mean, and so, but then you have more restrictions. But I'd like to hear from the law director, having asked her to come and talk about our interpretation.
All right, well, thank you. Your duties are under 230703A and C. And in this situation specifically, asking for, I suppose they're using the term interpretation, but you're to determine if there was an error in any order, requirement, decision, determination, grant, refusal made by the zoning inspector or other administrative official and the interpretation of the provisions of the zoning code. And then the Board of Zoning Appeals may reverse an order, reverse or affirm wholly or partly or modify the order, requirement, or decision appealed from. The decision was made, and Mr. Pearson agreed that although there was a clerical error, that it was actually, the decision was made under 230502A. And so your determination is as to whether or not there was an error in the Service Safety Director's interpretation of that and her decision to deny. So I think your starting point really is 230502 and looking at that and making the decision there, because it's really as simple as that.
That's overturning the safety director's decision.
And her determination was it was under 230502A, her denial. So I think that's what you really have to look at and make that determination.
Okay, what is
Is that different from what
230502 say?
Pearson's asking?
No, I think that he is saying that, that an interpretation of her decision, I mean, that's all you're charged with tonight. He
Right.
appealed it, and that's all you're charged with.
Right.
Now, yes, later on, he could go back and ask for it to be not more objectionable in non-conforming use.
Right. We're not asking to expand any nonconformity on the B3 portion of the lot, where it's noted that there is nonconformity. We're asking just for a use permitted by right that's permitted in a R3 zone. I think as Mr. Baum noted,
That's not it.
in a B3 for parking, it's more restrictive because you can't park on the ground for residential use. So, which side of the line are we going to go to? And we would argue that property rights would trump or would be the deciding factor when in fact we're providing more parking, which through the discussion has been something that's favorable. Mr. Baum actually sponsored legislation quite a few years ago for one parking spot for each person, where the requirement used to be like 1.5 parking spots per unit. And so not only have we met the requirement, we're exceeding the requirement. But I'm kind of getting into the non-conforming use arguments too. Agreed with what Ms. Eliason said.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to go and just state my 2 cents.
Well, before you do that, could
Okay.
you read to us 230502?
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, good.
Okay. First of all, considering this based on the original agenda we had in here as a B3, although a portion of that happens to be in R3. And I'm just going to read and ACC 230502, and then wherever I think I have a point, I'm going to pause and explain more. It says, no existing building or premises or the use thereafter or thereof not permitted by the zoning code in the zone in which such building or premise is located, except when required to do so by law or order. And again, my interpretation in here is that they were not ordered to do anything, but if they want to have additional parking space, by law, they have to gravel it or surface it with something besides just the grass. So that's in their right to do so. And then again, no existing building and so on shall be enlarged, extended, reconstructed, substituted, or altered. Now, my interpretation here is that maybe going from a grassy parking space to a graveled parking space maybe is altering or maybe reconstruction, but it says unless changed to a use permitted in the zone in which such building or premises is located. So unless changed to a use permitted, and this use is permitted in such zone.
You mean in
And then
R3?
finally, and except as follows. And the follows goes to the A, which we'll be discussing later. So my take from what I have studied, and I spent a lot of time on this, by the way, is that I disagree with the Safety Service Director's position. Now, each one of you can maybe state your case. Let's just start with Kay.
I actually came to the same conclusion that you did.
Okay.
I did.
Betty?
Well, I think that she's correct, as I think I've already indicated, because whether this is slipping over into a different zone, it is in fact all one property in the ownership of a single person or persons, and it is an enlargement of the use of the property itself, regardless of the difference in the zone. So I think she was correct in her decision.
I think I agree with Betty.
Okay.
And I agree with Betty.
And I know you are not voting, but maybe you can express anything that we can enlighten us.
I wish I could. I'm convinced that the part of parking is in an R zone, and the R zone requirement should apply to the parking.
Kind of thorny. Kind of thorny.
It is thorny. I mean, we talked about this before. We have properties that are divided between zones. We have properties that are grandfathered in because when the zoning code was created, it didn't take into account all of the strange little shapes and everything else we have in the city. And then it becomes our problem to try to figure out what is the best alternative use for property. The assumption that that area of Union Street is going to suddenly become businesses, and therefore they're all B3s and they're going to be on the first floor, I think is just
Well, that's sort
pie
of
in
what
the
I
sky.
meant when I said what should be the intention in regard to the development of the city? Do we really, it's a mixed use now, lots of nonconformity.
Yep.
So do we expect this to be finally all residential, or should it head as it's zoned in a more business-oriented direction?
But it's more stuff expanding in that part of town, you know, from business that, you know, where it was a car wash and a drive-through is now a parking lot that will potentially probably become a building for Ohio University. So, you look at where the alley is right now, and where if that alley wasn't a factor into the, you know, separation of the piece of property, but it, you know, when the laws was done 30 years ago, and you see property changing every day in town, you know, that there's not many businesses left on that part of town anymore. It's, you know, it's turned into more residential, especially compared to the large complex that, you know, butts up against 218.
Sure.
And then you look Carr Street, it's more residential, but if you go Carr Street and across Schaefer, then you got a piece of business. If you go across from the business, you got a cemetery. So it's
mixed.
Yes,
so.
it's very mixed, but I think what they're trying to do is offer parking. I think is amazing because we constantly run into the issue of no parking to the previous case of, you know, trying to get off-street parking. You know, people can't park on that part of town on the street, but what's stopping them from parking and blocking the alley or parking more up Schaefer Street? So I think they're trying to help the problem that we're facing in town, which is parking.
Got two questions for the code office. First of all, they want to consider also the property at 224, which is all of it is in B30. Do we need to vote twice or just once for both of them? Because there were two refusals.
That's correct, it's two refusals, so you have to vote on each one.
On each one. And the second one is that on 218, where majority of it is in B3, and the zoning line goes right through the top of that 1/4 of it. Is there anything that says the entire property could be considered maybe B3 as far as the parking goes, or that is not defined in the code?
I mean, in reality, what can go on that piece of property there is,
Grass.
Grass?
That's it.
Yes,
Drainage,
grass.
since there's a drainage problem there. I mean, when I drove back there, there was a huge puddle in the alley.
Now, the question was if we could consider the whole thing as B3.
How can you just suddenly say, oh, I'm
can't do
changing
that
it
spot
to
zoning.
I'm not
We can't
changing
do
it,
that.
it's just because this is gonna be hardship for the property owner. If part of the property is in a different zone,
Well, that would have to go to the planning commission.
Yeah,
which we discussed
Yeah.
at the last
right.
meeting.
This goes back to the question of divided properties. And it says use they're authorized thereon and the other zone requirements applying to the least restricted portion of the lot under the zoning code shall be considered as extending to the entire lot.
but for parking, B3 is the least
Yeah,
uh,
restricted.
restrictive.
Except that in the, right.
I mean, majority of the property is in B3.
And if you wanna go
Yes.
with the least restrictive, that would be B3 for parking.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that they can park the entire yard, whatever they have.
No, but
What
not,
are you saying?
not in the R3. I guess they could, but
Well, I mean, if the alley wasn't
Yeah.
dividing the property, what would be there? It would be,
well, there would be no access if there was no alleyway. I mean, if you look back there, that's how all those people get into their,
Right.
By the way, I also saw gravel, the parking spots in the neighborhood besides these two properties. Would you like to vote on this, or should we also hear
Well,
what the
they're
case of
different.
24?
No,
Let's
we're-
vote on the service safety director's
Yes.
decision about
Right.
this particular property, 218, and then we can go to the next
and
one,
this
which
goes
is
on if
slaughter
it
different.
overturns
Okay.
her decision, and then they have to go from there for another case,
Or not.
or not.
or not.
Okay, what do we do? Do we make a motion or something?
Yes, I think I remember what Mr. Eschenbacher had recommended last.
There is no findings we have to go through.
No
So
finding.
I think we go to, I move that we agree with the interpretation of the service safety director in the refusal of permit application number PR 17-000001 to the property at 218 West Union Street.
So the motion is that we agree with the service safety director's determination?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Joan, second. Okay, those of you who agree with the Safety Service Director's decision on the refusal, raise your hands. Those who do not agree, okay, 3-2.
Which way? Because I couldn't see the hands down there.
Yeah,
Three of
3
us
to 2,
agree with
they
her.
agree with the
Two
Safety
do
Service
not agree
Director's
with
decision.
her. So does that take us to 224?
To 224.
Jesus.
Okay, again, my name's Steve Pearson. I'm here representing Mr. Don Linder, co-owner of 224 West Union Street. This situation is a little different. There's no zone line splitting the property. It is a property that has permits for 5 residents with 0 parking. What we have proposed to do is add 3 gravel parking spots off the public alley in the rear yard. And again, this is entirely located in the B3 zone. I guess the question then becomes the interpretation of the basis of the refusal, which is extending non-conforming uses. And it has been, noted by the code office too, that we're talking about 2 nonconformities, the residential on the first floor and the parking. So it's We're not asking for any more residents or any less residents, so we're not asking to increase the residency. We're just asking to create some additional parking. For substitution of non-conforming uses, I can tell you as an administrator under 3 mayors and for a period of time of 20 years, that the interpretation of this section of the code was if someone wanted to voluntarily reduce any nonconformity that they had, it would not fall under this section of the code. Because you're wanting to come into conformity. You are voluntarily approaching conformity, coming as close as you can to getting it, close enough that you could even, obtain a permit to meet the requirements. So historically, this section has not even been applied to situations like this. If you wanted to voluntarily reduce your nonconformity, you were allowed to do that. And that wasn't admittedly, that was an administrative interpretation. And it's one that we believe is more practical in terms of having the possibility of loading up the zoning board with any number of nonconformities in town. That anytime they wanted to reduce some nonconformity, they would have to come to this board. I believe you'd be swamped with cases if that was strictly the administrative interpretation on every permit that was received at the Code Enforcement Office. And so I guess essentially that's what we're asking for you to interpret that section of the code the way we interpret it, because we're not extending the non-conforming residential on the first floor. We're not changing anything. We're not asking for more people. What we're trying to do is voluntarily reduce the non-conformity. And this essentially will be the same type of argument that will be made if this is refused. It's basically the same argument that we'll make for a substitution of nonconformity because it is going to be less objectionable. So I don't want to extend too far into that argument, but again, just an administrative interpretation. Should owners be allowed to voluntarily reduce nonconformity without having to come to the board, especially when they're not extending, enlarging? See what I'm saying? We're not changing anything. We're just trying to reduce the nonconformity. So that's basically the argument. Would you interpret it that way, or would you interpret the code the way that the Service Safety Director interpreted it? This same argument could be made too for 218, even though it's a different situation with the zoning on or the use proposed on it in a different zone. We conformed to that requirement, that zoning. 2 spots in an R3 could be gravelled. So, but we'll make that substitution case later for graveling, not being able to drain it, to reduce the nonconformity, to increase parking. So that's essentially the argument for 224.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Do we want any more discussion or just go to the voting? This is easier.
Yes, I think it is.
Well, it's a little bit different, though.
Yes, it is.
And I think it's a question of either, if you've got a property with multiple nonconformances, as Mr. Sorois was saying, that any change that's being made that addresses one of the nonconformances and brings it into conformity should only be considered on those merits, and you wouldn't consider the other pieces that are nonconforming. And if that's the case, then this would not be relevant. Yeah.
It probably is relevant, but if you're reducing a nonconformity, I'm all for that.
Mm-hmm.
But to assume that anybody who wanted to reduce the nonconformity of their property would have to come to the zoning board, I don't believe is true, and I think we'd have to consult our experts, not tonight, but if I wanted to add parking to my house, I think I could just do it and wouldn't have to do a thing. If I had a rental property, that might be different, but to say every property in Athens...
Well, it depends on the zone
change,
also.
Maybe, but it's an argument that's overreaching to me.
It depends on the zoning, because in your own home, if you're R1, then you also have to meet the coverage of the building coverage.
Yeah, I don't mean to distract us too far.
Okay, any other discussions?
Well, I think that I think I'm going to have to also agree with the Service Safety Director on this one, in a strict reading of the code. And I think that's important. Otherwise, we'll have people out there reducing their nonconformity to whatever they want, and then who knows that they've done that? And the code actually says once you've whenever a non-conforming use has been changed to a conforming use, it can't go back. Well, who knows that it went away when someone else decides to bring it back? I mean, come on.
But it says in here, unless change to a use which is permitted in this zone. What they are requesting for 224 is permitted in this zone.
Except that this is a
Unless-
piece of grandfathered property in the first place. That's why we're talking about the non-conforming issue. So if it strictly was already in, if it had business on the first floor, had residents up above, there's no issue. But this is a grandfathered property, and it needs it fits in a different category, John. Ed's agreeing with me. Just for the record.
Yeah, that's
Doesn't mean
I do
anything.
not. Yeah, that's the way I interpret it, so.
Trying to get to the right place.
If there's no discussions, let's make a motion, just like the last
Can I
one.
make just one comment, one observation on it?
Sure.
I believe that the code office is well-suited to note every nonconformity in town. All the rental permits have notations of what any nonconforming use of the property is. Any application that they would get would be reviewed, just as this one was, because there was some question raised about how would you know when people change things from nonconforming to conforming. But I'll just give you one example. I don't know if it was permitted or not, but next to the Richland Fire Station on Richland Avenue, Station 2, the city had a property that was converted from single-family residential to a storage facility. It has recently been reconverted back to first-floor residential in a B2 zone with parking on the ground. Now, the city is exempt from their own regulations, but in that case, I don't know if that was tracked, was note made of that or not, but I'm sure the code office is fully aware of all the non-conforming situations in town and would at least catch it on an application. That's the only comment I have there.
Who wants to make a motion?
I'd like to make one.
Okay, sure.
Obviously, there's been a struggle here to interpret what's going on, and the reality of it is what I am intending on doing is to create additional parking where none exists, and really trying to do my best in this town to create parking when that's the largest and most difficult problem to solve. And I think that there's a certain challenge that you're trying to interpret the code in a manner and apply it that maybe can't be applied. And that's a challenge, and I understand that. And I think there's hundreds of properties, or at least dozens of properties that are similar here. And I think that there's a benefit to create parking where none exists. And certainly in this zone, the university is going to be expanding a gigantic footprint down there. We have no off-street parking, literally, in that zone. So by not allowing basically what I would consider to be, an issue of allowing something that's really trying to do its best to conform to what everybody wants, and not allowing that is just, I just don't understand that. It's just a very challenging situation. When rudimentarily I am trying to attempt to create parking, where none exists. And that is the largest problem in the city of Athens, or one of them. Okay, thank you.
Motion. Lisa, your turn.
I don't want to do it.
I can just do it again.
Okay.
That sounds good.
I move that we agree with the interpretation of the Service Safety Director in the
Can you
refusal.
speak up a little?
Yes, in the refusal of permit application number PR 17-0000002, I believe, to the property at 224 West Union Street.
You can second.
Second.
Lisa, second. Okay. Those who do agree with the decision of Safety Service Director to refuse this case, raise your hand. Those who oppose, same result. By the way, you folks have 5 days to change your mind if you.
Well, I'm assuming that we will actually hear these and see if we want to give them variances at some point.
Right.
But at the moment, I think the city service director was
Yes, sir.
correct. Now they can come and ask for leniency. Whatever.
Okay, it'll be our intention, once we receive the documentation on the board's decision tonight, that we will apply for substitution of non-conforming use on both properties. It'll be a separate argument, a little more extensive, with a little more presentation on equal property rights, substantial justice done, no detriment to the code, so we'll have a lot more information next time. Thank you very much.
Okay, and you can possibly maybe coming next month, or whenever you choose.
Today was the deadline for the neighbors.
Oh, okay. Okay, we have one more item, and that is to, where's my paper? The disposition of the minutes from April 11, 2017 meeting. I read everything, there's one minor typo I found, but otherwise was good. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move.
Second?
I second.
All in favor? Okay, we got 5-0.
Okay.
And since we don't have anything else to discuss, the meeting is adjourned.
All right.